Hi, welcome to Tea for Yourself. Great to have you here on the call, wherever you are in the world at this moment. Raising consciousness is at the heart of what we talk about on this program. But when you think of consciousness raising, how often do you think about your eating habits? Our guest today says the reason you turn to food when you're stressed or distressed is that you don't have better ways of managing life's ups and downs. Koenig is an expert on the psychology of eating. She says you can transform your eating habits and your life by developing effective life skills so that you won't need to turn to mindless eating to make it through the day. Karen's the author of Outsmarting Overeating, Boost Your Life Skills and Your Food Problems. Outsmarting Overeating takes a look at some essential life skills, things like physical self-care, handling emotions, problem solving, and living consciously, which, as you know, we like to talk about on this program. I want to get into some of those areas in a moment, but first, Karen, let's look at a period earlier in your life when you had your own eating challenges. What was it like for you when you were dealing with your own eating issues?
Well, let me start by saying that I'll be 68 years old. So I would say half a lifetime ago. The second half of my life, I lived as a normal eater. My first half, I was what I would call a world-class binge eater, chronic dieter. My weight yo-yoed up and down. I'd starve myself, then I'd eat huge amounts of food. I was so unhappy with my relationship with food and my body.
Well, you said that trouble eaters are going to stay trouble eaters unless they fix the rest of their lives. What are some of the areas they really need to look at right off the bat before they can see progress?
Well, one of them is coping and comfort and using food to soothe themselves or for excitement and pleasure. You know, we all do this to a certain extent. But when you have a fully rounded life, when you can go to other people, when you're upset and they'll help soothe you, when you have your own emotional resources to put things into perspective, not hold on to them, and when you have such other kinds of pleasures in your life that food is just one of them, everything changes. I mean, that's an example. When you're not so stressed and you're not so distressed, you're much less likely to turn to food.
Mm-hmm. Now, the book does not deal with counting calories, big or small portions, or types of diet, anything like that. But diets, as we're hearing constantly, even with so many books on the market, diets just don't work. Where do you weigh in, pardon the pun, on the idea of a diet?
Well, we have known, or I should say there has been research done, so since the early 80s, that confirmed that diets don't work long term. The statistic that has been pretty steady is about 95% of people who diet and lose weight regain it, and 90% regain more than they originally lost. And I might add that the weight that you regain is not in the form of muscle. It's in the form of fat. So diets are deprivational. Our body thinks we're in starvation, so it slows down its metabolism. When we're dieting, all we're thinking about is food. It feels unfair. We don't like being restricted, so we rebel. And we rebel by overeating. So what I teach and what is taught all over the world is called the intuitive eating movement, which has been around since about the 80s, is how to be a normal or intuitive eater and eat according to appetite so that you never have to diet or deprive yourself.
Mm-hmm. I like that you say intuitive. Is there kind of a visceral gut feeling that you get that you know you've had enough?
Yes, and it's exactly what you said, a gut feeling. If you're paying attention, you know what fullness, which is quantity, feels like, and you know what satisfaction, which is quality, feels like. And in fact, we our food tastes really good to a certain point, then flavor peaks, but we only know that if we're eating slowly and chewing and really living consciously and eating consciously and paying attention. So I mean, when you think about it, humans have been around for something like 200,000 years. So we have evolved into people who can rely on an appetite, except when we listen to all these external ways of doing things. And then we learn to distrust our appetite, which we were born with.
Among the life skills that get attention in the book is our relationships to people. And one of the earliest people relationships we have is one with our parents. You don't bag on parents or parenting in general, to your credit, but the parent-child relationship can affect eating habits. Talk about how that happens.
You're absolutely right. It can happen in several ways. The way I view parents is there can be a cause and effect, but there's no blame, because our parents learned from imperfect people. If we're parents, we are imperfect. Our grandparents were imperfect. So everyone teaches from the best they can, all they know, even if it's not good enough. And then we're all learning life skills as we get older. So what happens if a parent is not comfortable around food and they model, let's say, mindless eating or binge eating, or the opposite end, chronic dieting, constantly jumping on the scale? The meaning we make of that is this is an important thing because, hey, this is what the big people in our life are doing. So that's one way through modeling that we get incorrect messages. The other is when parents invalidate kids. They say, you can't still be hungry, or, okay, you've eaten enough, or you have to eat. Now, obviously, as parents, you have to do some of that. But when it's age appropriate, after that, what you really want to do is teach kids to trust their own appetite. And some of that you do by helping, and some you do by modeling trusting your own.
You mentioned the scales, and I'm wondering, do you ever talk to your clients about actually getting on the scale and watching the numbers, or do the numbers kind of take a back seat here?
Yes, the latter. I actually suggest to them, and I ask them to experiment with not weighing themselves, because weight it's so backwards. Weight is at the end of a process. So you don't start at the end of a process where you put your attention. It's not a weight problem, it's an eating problem. And if you start at the gate with appropriate behaviors, eating mostly when you're hungry, eating foods you enjoy, not thinking about good and bad foods, stopping when you're full and satisfied, then you don't have to worry about the weight. So I get weighed when I go to the doctor's office, but other than that, I don't think about weighing myself, because here's what happens. You get on the scale and you weigh less than you thought, and you think, great. And so then you think you can eat more. Or you get on the scale and you weigh more than you thought, and then you say, oh no, I better not eat anything today. Well, what dieting and weighing yourself do are dysregulate appetite. And really what you want to do is regulate your appetite.
Well, women have traditionally had the role of caretaker, making sure that everyone in the family is okay, but that can often leave a woman feeling less than cared for herself. How does that sometimes translate into eating problems?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of my books is called Nice Girls Finish Fat. Put yourself first to change your eating forever. And not that there aren't nice boys out there, there certainly are, but there are certain kinds of women who overly care for others and take care of themselves with food, because when if they're taking care of themselves, they feel they're selfish, and then they feel guilty. And, it also, in terms of culture, is more of a problem for women, because we are the ones that have had this whole, you have to be attractive thing pressed on us. We are the ones who do most, and have throughout history, not so much anymore, but, do most of the cooking, the food shopping, the cleanup, feeding the kids. So we're around food more. And it is, so for a lot of cultural reasons, it is a lot harder for women. But which is not to say that women can't learn new skills and practice new behaviors, whatever age they are.
And another book you've written is called The Rules of Normal Eating. How do you define normal eating?
Normal is 4 guidelines, and people do it quite differently. And it's also not healthy eating, which I'm going to explain in a minute. Normal is eating mostly when you're hungry. Now, obviously, you've got stuff going on later, and you're not going to be eating. You might eat when you're not hungry. So you have to use the analytical part of your brain as well. But it really, food is for nourishment. That's what it's meant for. So mostly you want to eat only when you're hungry enough. 2, you want to choose foods that you like, that you enjoy, that are tasty. There's no such thing as good and bad foods. Those are moral terms. There are foods that are more nutritious and less nutritious. So you want to get away from thinking this is good and this is bad, because you're not a bad person if you eat non-nutritious food, and you're not a good person if you eat nutritious food. Mm-hmm. The third rule is to eat with awareness, which means really relaxing, slowing down until you can do it easily, eating without distraction, so you can really pay attention. Letting food sit on your tongue, because that's where your taste buds are. And they're going to transmit the information about satiation to your brain. So it's putting a different kind of attention on eating, not eating and feeling guilty. Guilt is a terrible dinner companion, mm-hmm. or feeling anxious. And the 4th rule is stopping when you're full or satisfied. And if you do all the other rules, when you get to that one, it's a lot easier, because you ate when you were hungry. You picked foods that you like to begin with. You can never get enough of what you didn't want to begin with. And you've eaten mindfully, so you'll know, okay, I can stop now. And, we can get food pretty much, most of us, fortunately, anytime. So rather than thinking, oh, I'll never eat this again, you can think, well, I'll eat it another time when I'm hungry. Mm-hmm. Lucky me.
I like that you use a very non-judgmental term in the book, dysregulated eaters. And I'm wondering, what are some of the things that keep dysregulated eaters from making the eating decisions that on an intellectual level they know would be best for them?
One thing is all or nothing thinking. It is rampant in what I call dysregulated or troubled eaters. And I use dysregulated because it really covers both ends of the spectrum, undereating, chronic undereating, or chronic overeating. And so the other thing that happens is people who are dysregulated eaters are often dysregulated in other areas. It's a question of not knowing how much, what's enough, which is a felt sense. And so they don't know how much play is okay. How much do they give to others? How much is it okay to take care of yourself? There's the sense of, I don't know what's sufficient in so many areas. And I often tease clients and tell them they have an enough disorder. Because underneath the problem with dysregulation, that's what the problem is. They don't really know what's enough. So that's another skill to learn. It's a skill I talk about in the book. When you start to have that felt sense of what's enough in many areas, it translates to eating.
You write that dysregulated eaters are masters at setting goals, and since we just started another year, possibly another set of resolutions, they may involve losing weight. So where do you stand on the idea of setting a goal or a resolution among your New Year's resolutions to lose weight?
Well, it seems like I've been doing this for about 35 years. I've treated hundreds and hundreds of people. And people who are dysregulated eaters don't seem to have great success with setting goals because they set them too big, and they're perfectionists, they're all or nothing. And so they like the structure for a while, and they like working towards something, but then it starts to feel oppressive. So they get tired of the structure and they go to the other end, which is freedom. And we all have that tension within us. Most people do. But this is to a greater extent. And then they have freedom freedom for a while, but that feels uncomfortable. That's, no goal. I don't care what I do. When that gets uncomfortable, they go back to too much structure. So I don't encourage people to set goals. And in terms of resolutions, it's been really interesting research done on it. And in fact, when we want to do something, we don't need resolutions. We make resolutions only when we don't really want to do something. I mean, think about the things we make resolutions about. If we want to do something, we just go do it. We don't need the resolution. And that's why they backfire. So I discourage resolutions, and I encourage people to want to do something because it's healthy for themselves, because they love themselves, because why wouldn't you do good things for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so much room for guilt and shame with eating disorders. How do you counsel in that area? It's a very deep issue and very sensitive. What do you say to people who are feeling guilt and shame? They seem to go hand in hand.
Well, the first thing I tell them is, overeating or mindlessly eating, even binge eating, it's not a sin and it's not a felony. It's not a crime. So, let's take off this heavy hand of what we're doing. People have done this, for millennia, overeating. And we happen to live right now in the most fat-phobic, sin-obsessed culture in the history of the world. And when you let that sink in, you realize the pressure that people feel about eating in a certain way, looking a certain way, weighing a certain amount. And it's ridiculous. And in fact, weight is the least successful, losing weight is the least successful motivator for people. The best one, the most successful, is to be healthy. So I encourage people to not feel guilty, really challenge those thoughts. What are they feeling guilty about? And are they feeling guilty while they're eating? And what's that experience like? I mean, it just ruins a meal. And people who have eating problems often come from shame-based families. So they had the shame before they had the eating problem, or before they had the excess weight. Because there's plenty of people who carry excess weight and they don't feel that shame. But that's because they didn't grow up in shame-based families.
Some dysregulated eaters might argue that genetics is a big reason for their weight. How much of a role does genetics have in a person's tendency to be on the large side? Are there statistics, percentages in that area?
Yes. The one that I use, because I like her writing, a science writer, Gina Colada, wrote a book called Rethinking Thin several years ago. And she quotes a study there that says 50 to 75% of our weight is genetically predetermined, which means there's about 30 or 50%. Now, I have heard challenges to that number, and I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist, but it makes sense to me. We have a set point, below which it's going to be hard to go, and above which it's going to be hard to go. And so that's another reason not to focus on weight, but to focus on health. There's a movement called Health at Every Size. They call it the Hayes movement. And Linda Bacon's a wonderful author on it. And she talks about how to be healthy at every size and to focus on health. And it's those people who actually end up eating a lot better.
People will often say that they can do it on their own. They don't need the help. What do you say to people who are going to try to go it alone? Because it seems like a tough road to hoe.
What I have said to them is experiment. If you find that over and over you feel you can't reach or sustain your goals, because a lot of times, you lose 100 pounds and you regain it. I have clients who've done that 3-4 times. It's heartbreaking. There's no shame in asking for help. You want to solve the problem. It doesn't matter if you have a flat tire. It doesn't really matter whether you change it or you ask for help. The point is to fix the tire and get on the road. So, but a lot of people who have eating problems do have difficulty asking for help. because it hasn't been there for them, let's say, in childhood, and they learn to keep doing it. But, you know, and they look to diets, and diets fail them rather than them failing on diets. So I think, you know, like with anything else, if it's going to help to ask someone, you have to help.
You like the idea of positive psychology in helping deal with these eating issues. Martin Seligman's name comes to mind when I think of positive psychology. Do you use that positive psychology in your own work with clients?
I don't use positive psychology, but what I often do with clients who will, you know, they'll make the most amazing change in their eating, but they'll tell me all the things that they didn't do well during the week. So very often I'll start off by saying, tell me something that went well during the week, because or else they will not even remember to tell me this amazing thing that they did. So I do that. But where I differ with positive psychology is one of my books called Starting Monday, 7 Keys to a Permanent Positive Relationship with Food, talks about the underlying reasons, which are mostly unconscious, that we can't sustain normal eating or weight loss. And that really has to do with our fears. And I believe that unless we deal with some of these unconscious fears, for instance, not wanting to give up food for comfort because you're not really good at comforting yourself any other way, or giving up fat or binge eater as an identity, or losing weight and feeling sexually vulnerable, until we resolve these underlying issues, we are not going to be able to succeed and sustain continuing to reach our goals. So that's where I differ with positive psychology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, one more question, and then we'll start to wrap it up. If you could choose just one thing from your book that readers could take away or accomplish, what would that one thing be right off the bat?
It would be that everyone is learning life skills. And so there's no shame in saying, I'd like to do this better. I'd like to do that better. And to the question I ask people is, what if your eating problems are not really about food? What if it really is about the rest of your life? And when the rest of your life is managed better, you will have a better relationship with food. So to pull them away from, well, it's really about my eating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Want to give us your website?
Sure. It's www.KarenRKoenig, and that's KOENIG.com. I also run a Yahoo Food and Feelings message board, which links to the website, and I blog twice a week, and I have links on that to the website.
A lot of helpful blog posts, too, at the website. Karen, thanks not only for being with us today, but for taking us through a mindful look at eating issues. I think it's long overdue. Please come back again and let us know what you're doing. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Karen Koenig, and we will link to Karen's website at cheatforyourself.com. Make sure when you're there to subscribe for updates on all guest arrangements and times when you can be with us on the call. Archive shows can be found on blogtalkradio.com. Key in the word geo-host and you're there. And the Cheat for Yourself YouTube page, youtube.com/geo-host, GIOHOST. This show being recorded in the month of February, and this being the month of Valentine's Day, I'm working on doing a show on relationships. It seems that falling in love is the easy part. Staying in love, well, that's another matter. So I'm looking to have a guest to give us some help in that area, and you want to be listening. I'll let you know more about that. I'll have more on future Genuines posts, so stay close, and I'll give you all the details. That's going to do it for today. Thank you very much for being with us. Be well, and I'll talk to you soon.